welcome to the Best Gay Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Hoppy. Today's episode is about masculinity, a topic close to my heart, not in the way you might think. Like many effeminate gay men, I grew up a little, how do you say, limp-wristed, a little light in the loafers. I had this big goofy grin as a child and a penchant for playing with my neighbor's Barbies, admittedly, rather than my own Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, although I did like the Turtles, not gonna lie. But when puberty hit my classmates, my happy life descended into a nightmare of bullying and beatings. My classmates called me the F-slur long before I even knew what that word meant or that I had something called a sexuality. I sometimes say that I came out at age 14, but that's a little bit of a lie. Like lots of effeminate boys, I didn't really have the luxury of staying closeted or coming out. It was written on my face. Today's guest may have grown up thousands of miles away in Puebla, Mexico, in a totally different cultural context. But we share a common experience of growing up as a little queer boy. Nolberto Gonzalez is a sexual health advocate, activist, turned content creator who has made promoting healthy sexuality his mission in life. For over a decade, he has led erotic, hands-on workshops tailored and designed to gay men called Sesiones Explicitas. And in today's episode, we pause to reflect not just on those toxic elements of masculinity that made our childhoods so traumatic, but we also brainstorm how can we salvage and recuperate those positive aspects of masculinity, and they do exist, on our journey towards healing. Let's listen in. Nolberto Gonzalez, welcome to the Best Gay Sex Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I feel like very honored because I always like to talk with you.
It is a pleasure.
Our conversations are always fun, are always interesting, are always deep, and they have always this personal ingredient that is not just about theory, even if we talk about theory. And that's what I think it's fabulous about you. One of the hundreds of fabulous things that you are. So thank you.
Absolutely. We met long ago back in 2007 at a conference in Puebla, where you are from. So can you tell viewers and listeners a little bit about, kind of situate them where you're from, where you grew up, and where you became like a little sexual being?
Yeah, well, I was born in Puebla, which is not a very, very, very small town now. It kind of became big. 2 hours far from Mexico City. It's a very conservative place. It's a very Catholic place. And I started to get involved in sexuality issues more like in the equivalent of high school to you. And when I started my university studies. First, I was interested in sexual health in general, and then my path went to HIV prevention and sexual and reproductive rights. And then I started to do some work with my own body and my own image about trying to work some kind of some issues about self-esteem and my image, how I was perceiving myself. And then I started to make some pictures of me every time with less and less clothes. And then I started to make adult content, and I was like balancing, like exploring both sides in parallel. It Around these years, that's when I met you. When I was starting to went into conferences and seminars and all this academic stuff. And in the meanwhile, I was like exploring my sexual life, first in terms of my body, not just in terms of how I saw my body and how I perceived my body, but also in terms of perceptions, of feelings, like physical pleasure and this elaborated pleasure. It's a pattern I have continued from all until today, of course.
You talked about growing up in Puebla and being a very Catholic, conservative place. Tell me a little bit about what it was to be like a little queer boy in a context like that.
It's very, very, very hard. It's like tons of people will feel related, and it's kind of strange how lots of us have been like together in this feeling of isolation, you know, like being queer in a small place, in a place that is very conservative, in a place that doesn't have a space for you. I remember, for example, every Christmas, I hate Christmas. And I remember Christmas as this period of time when I was like punished for being myself, in terms of the big family gets reunited, and here we don't buy stuff for everyone because the families are huge in here. So we what's the word? We write down the names of everyone in little papers, and then we
We call
give
it a
it.
white elephant.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
I remember that every year when someone got my name out of it, they have a few weeks, of course, to buy a present for me. I remember that I was like, all the presents that I received was very, very disappointed. Sometimes they were kind of cruel. And I remember that I was like 10, 11 years old. And I received like a bucket of these kind of giant Legos that are for childs, that are like in kindergarten, because I was like, okay, these people doesn't know me. And I remember when I was like 13 years, because I have always been like very siempre se me ha notado. I have always shown, you can always tell that I'm not heterosexual, of course, and that happened since I was a little child. So I remember when I was like 13 years old, an uncle of mine gave me an image of Jesus Christ in a cross, like 1 meter tall. And I was like, okay, this is a statement.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And everyone else got presents that they kind of liked, because they have always talked about what they wanted. They always talked about their desires, and they always talked about what they did, how they played, as childs, we give these informations to the adults around us. But in some way, I always had this special treatment, and I was like, okay, I know these people doesn't know me and doesn't know how to treat me, how to face the reality that I'm putting on their faces. When I came out of the closet with my mom and my dad, I was like around 14.
Wow.
And it was a very, very interesting mental process that I went to, because I've always been this anxious person. You know me. I have always been this person with anxiety problems. So I was kind of into a girl during the school time when I was 40 years old. We were really into each other. Uh, and my mom and my dad were very, very excited about she and I being a couple or something. Even if I was like kind of excited about this, I knew that eventually I would have relationship with boys. And in my head, there was a huge, huge, horrible story about me giving the wrong message to my dad and mom that I was straight, and then I had to keep on this lie during all my life. And then I picture myself getting married for social pressure. And then I picture myself cheating on my wife and leaving her with my kids to go out with some random guy in my face. I was like a Mexican telenovela.
Yeah.
And the way I ended this telenovela was coming out of with them. I was like, all right, I'm into this girl. I do. I have no issues with that. I hope you don't have these issues with that, of course. But you have to know, you consider this a warning if you want to, that eventually maybe I will have this with boys too. Sorry.
What a fascinating way to come out. You basically came out as like gay but with a girlfriend.
Exactly. And I've always had this openness. During some time of my life, I introduced myself as bisexual. Now I identify myself more as a queer person. But politically, of course, surrounded by all these HIV calls, of course, I'm politically identified as gay man because I have a lot of issues that cross my reality that makes me configure myself as that. But coming back to the Mexican telenovela, of course, that's the way how I stopped it, and that's
That's how.
the
Sorry.
way
That's
that's
how
the
what?
way how I stopped the telenovela, and that's the way how I started to face my sexuality in terms of okay, so I think this is how this is. I think this is what life is about, like facing the things as they are, maybe not trying to push things into categories or expectations or desires. And if I'm true to myself in this part, maybe the other people will have the chance to know if they accept me and to know if they want, and there will be no false expectations.
So, how did your parents react when you told them?
There was another telenovela. It was more like a series, and that was the second season. Of course, they sent me to the psychologist, of course. And I went to the psychologist. She was a wonderful therapist. She was working in the clinic that we went to, for the insurance we have for the government. It's a free clinic and they have a free access to things. So she was very supportive and she was very wise. And she helped me a lot to understand that there was nothing wrong with me. She said,
Good.
and I have this tattooed in my mind. She said, I could help you to figure out if you're into boys, into girls, into both. You have already figured it out. I can help you to figure it out, if you are into boys and girls and you feel some conflict inside of you. I can help you with that conflict, but seems like you have this solved. If you wanted to talk to your parents about it, I think I could help you to make a decision, to make a what could be good, what could go wrong, and you can make a decision. You already made that decision. I could help you to not feel guilty about who you are, and not to feel less worthy for being who you are, but you have already done it. So it seems like now it's your parents' problem, and I'm very glad to help them if they want to come here. So I was like,
Oh, wow.
I didn't expect to get this reaffirmation of everyone out of my own head. It was very life changing. Absolutely, that changed my life. And from this, I told that to my parents, and the answer was, so we're going to look for another psychologist. And I was like,
No.
okay. Yes, they were like very committed to that cause.
Yeah.
They went to the psychologist, they went to her, but they didn't tell me. And the anxiety thing. Well, I decided, I think there should be a word in English. I decided unilateralmente, I decided for everyone. I decided for everyone that I would never talk about it again until they come up. They come up. And they decided, without telling me, of course, that they wouldn't talk about the issue unless I would bring it to the conversation. So there was a 6-year silence in my house. I was estranged in my house during 6 years. We didn't talk about anything more than the daily stuff. And that's when I started high school and university. Of course, it changed my dynamic with my family. Of course, we were like strangers to each other. Like 6 years later, in Mexico, we have these altars to the dead people on November, Dia de Muertos. And I started to work with an association. And we made an altar de muertos. We made an ofrenda for LGBTQ people who committed suicide. We put it in a house of culture. It was a building in Puebla that works culture issues. It was kind of a demonstration. You get your group, they sign up, and they show your. My mom went to that exhibition because it was a permanent exhibition, and it was like a coincidence. I was there, and she went into with my sister. And then that's when she realized that I was doing all this stuff. And the issue didn't stop for me.
in those 6 years. Yeah.
I did stop this conversation at home, of course, but I didn't stop working in it personally for a second. No one talked about it during the event, during the demonstration, And later at night, when I arrived home, my mom was washing dishes, and I told him, "Well, thank you." So for what? Thank you for not making a silly scandal, because that's what you normally do. Thank you for behaving, uh, for being an adult. And she was like, I haven't talked to you about it, and maybe this has been a mistake, but I want you to know that I'm open to talk about this every time you want to, that I have been waiting for from you to tell you that I'm more than okay with that I love you a lot, but I didn't want to bring up to the conversation because I thought it would be invasive. And I was like, it was a very strange feeling between reaffirmation, like, okay, I really wanted this. I can't blame you for making this decision, because in some way I made the same decision as you. In my mind, I was protecting you from the reality, and in your mind, you were protecting me from reality. I can't blame anyone but the culture. I just blame the culture. So we kind of lost 6 years. After that 6 years, I had a full conversation with my parents, and they told me they went to the psychologist, and they loved her, but not as obsessed as I was with her. But then it happens that they found a friend of them in the clinic. There's always this friend who has maybe not studies in some issues, but you give to that friend the ability, the title of that wise person.
Yeah.
There's always someone who maybe didn't study a lot, but there's someone that you confide, So they found this friend, and he has a very strange way he had a very strange advice for them, but it worked in them, and I'm thankful for that. So they told me, we found this friend, we talked about this, we have just came out of the office with the psychologist, like feeling kind of like confused, and we saw this friend, and he saw that we were like intrigued or worried and concerned, and basically what he told us was, okay, but you love your son, right? Yes, we did. Yeah, but maybe people will treat him bad. I was like, uh-huh. So you love him, right? So you want him not to feel rejected in the outside. So you want to make for him a nice space at your home, right? And it was very effective for them. I think it maybe was a kind of maybe he speak on their language.
Yeah.
And I was trying to speak in another language, Maybe it's a thing between generations. Maybe it's something that has to do a little bit more with maybe not trying to explain a lot of things, And maybe that's why it works on them or on their generation. Like, I'm telling you to do this because I'm your mom, and that's enough reasons,
Right.
Maybe.
End of story.
Yes, exactly. And I'm very thankful for that. It took 6 years to get to this conversation, but I don't feel bad about it. I feel that now my relationship with my father and my mother is great. I love my father. I love my mother with all my heart. And they have known my boyfriends. They have known my spaces. Once I moved to Mexico City, they have came and visited. We have a very, very good relationship now. I'm still very far from my bigger family because I don't think
the uncle who gave you the cross.
Yes,
you're maybe not so
I don't.
close with.
No. Eventually, some cousins come to me telling me that they had the courage to come out because I was the first one in the family.
Oh, that's so
It also
great, though.
helped a lot that I was always this kind of nerdy, intelligent guy, like this library mouse. We have this expression in Spanish, and I was always that person. So I got good notes. I was like, in my family, I was known for the one that is going to be very, very intelligent, very successful, and smart and everything. So that was like the good quality that my family recognized about me. And that's in some way still put me on the map. And I was very, very happy that some of my cousins has reached me years before to tell me that, okay, I I did it, and thanks to you uh for doing something, for not keep quiet, remain silent.
Well, that's really great that you were able to be that kind of trailblazer. I certainly experienced the same similar thing in my family and my community, where I was definitely ahead of the curve coming out at 14 also. So we share that experience. And I also, my parents took me to the psychologist also. And then the psychologist ended up being really supportive about the whole gay thing. It did not go the way that I expected it to, or probably the way my parents expected it to be honest. And I'm grateful for that in retrospect.
Yeah. It's
So,
very interesting how it's just something that has just crossed my mind. There's a lot of things that we need to change because it's very unfair to put this pressure on 14 years old individuals. It's
yeah, I
very,
mean,
very, very strange. And some things just have never changed. Well, that was just the idea.
so you're growing up in Puebla. You've come out to your parents, but there's this 6 years of silence. I presume probably your first sexual experiences probably took place sometime in those 6 years. Is that a fair assessment? What was that like?
Yes. That was very, very interesting, that story. I was in high school. I was 16 years old, and I don't know the age of the other guy, but I'm very, very sure he knew that I was underage, of course.
Mm,
Because they were in 2002, 2003, to have internet in your house was a luxury, you know? We had the cyber cafes, and you ran to computer per hour, and oh my God, I feel like like my teachers talking to me about the 60s.
right. It
And
feels like
then,
a way, way back again. Yeah.
and by that time, and at that moment in history, we didn't have apps, for cell phones. There was chat rooms, there was gay.com, and there
Yes.
was Latin America category, and there was gay men in a black color. And I remember that I went there. There was a cyber cafe out of my, just crossing the street from my school, a preparatoria. Everyone is underage in preparatoria. So you do the math. So the guy who was in charge of the place, someday I was like chatting with a random person because you have no information but the nickname. And yes, of course. Yeah. Uh, I think telenovela runs through my veins because I'm Mexican, maybe. And then
My
in the moment
gosh, that's
and then I receive a message, and you insert the music of your favorite telenovela, dun, 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 and the guy next to you with with a red shirt. And I was like, you know, I was very, very happy because I really like that guy. I
yeah.
found him very attractive. He had this nerdy look. He had a beard. He had a wonderful belly. He was cute. He was really, really, really cute. And I don't remember how, but sometimes I had to go to school Saturdays for some uh, signatures. Actually, I don't remember clearly, but sometimes we had to go to school on Saturdays. And the most of things around the school were closed. You have like lot of you have a lack of a structure on these Saturdays. So I decided that I was trying to kill some time at the cafe, and it was closed. And I was getting out of the building where it was, and I ran into that guy. I was like, I'm just gonna check some things in there, so I will not be open today. I'm sorry, but if you want to join me to get these things, upstairs, just you and that. And I was like, all right, that's it. Yeah. Of course, it was unprotected. Yes, it was unprotected. Of course, I was, yes. And I'm talking about 2002. It was way before PrEP. It was way before my first HIV test. It was way before a lot of things that I know now. And it was way before a lot of things that I consider. There are like the non-negotiable things that I have put myself in my sexual life. But there are things that I have solved later. In that time, I wanted to have this reaffirmation experience, because I knew I didn't feel pressured about there's some experience that you're losing that you have to that you need to have now. I was like, I wanted to I wanted to prove myself that I was attractive to someone. I wanted to prove myself that someone would like to have these interactions with me. I didn't want a boyfriend. I didn't want a relationship. I didn't want a happily ever after story. I wanted to feel desired, and that's what I got. It was sloppy, yes. It was not really good. He had one of the most gorgeous dicks I have ever seen in my life. I remember it clearly. And it felt great, but yeah, it wasn't the idea, but I have no regrets.
What more can you ask for a
Yes,
first time?
exactly. I would have liked to have a little more preparation for that. I have always been um, this very open person about things. So I wish I was the kind of person who were always carrying condoms, for example. But I didn't come up with the idea until that day. So I was like, all right, I would have changed that to feel safer, to feel more secure, and to enjoy a little bit more of the experience. Yes, because I was worried some days before. Of course, I was very, very worried. But in terms of the experience and expectations, I was absolutely satisfied. 5 stars.
I love that. I love to hear that. So that's an amazing first time experience. I'm glad it was positive and fulfilling. Do you remember some of those early sexual experiences maybe that didn't go so well that kind of you learned some lessons the hard way?
Yes, of course. And I had time to think about it.
Yeah.
I had time, but there's always so many things. The one that I have talked about the most these years, some friends and I were talking about how um, the traditionally attractive people, hegemonico. What's the word in English for hegemonico? Hegemonic?
Hegemonic, yeah.
Hegemonic, yeah. Uh, we have like this kind of, I don't know, I won't call it an idea because it's more than an idea, but I won't say it's evidence. But well, you will get it as long as I stop here.
Mainstream beauty norms, is that?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The most of the time, the people that have the most of these attractive traditional features, most of the time, it looks like they seem to only need that and not to put some effort, not to put creativity. I'm just putting in here my attractive, my wonderful nose, my huge pectorals, my muscles. And because I'm the ugly one, I'm putting all the effort. So we have this saying that handsome people have horrible fucks, basically. I remember in kind of these days, I was in Manhunt chatting in that cybercafe. Well, I had to enter another cybercafe. So I was chatting with a guy that lived like 2 blocks from me, from where I was living. And it was this beautiful, traditionally beautiful, handsome man, very white skin. Mexico is a very racist country. Don't let them try to convince you of the contrary. Very white skin, green eyes, a wonderful nose, very nice body, everything. He sent me a message. Hey, how are you? Let's meet. And I was like, I would gladly do, but I have to present a test in my school, so I don't have time now. Can we do it tomorrow? And his answer was shocking. I wish I could translate it fully. He was like, no. It's not that I'm like you. I don't like you. I'm just horny. And I was like, how buried are you?
Yeah. off,
Yes, of course. I felt offended.
as you should.
Yes, of course. But I I I I decided that was going to be the only interaction. A few weeks later, he writes to me again, and I was like, oh, that was the guy who was rude with me. And he invited me again, and I went.
Yeah.
Because I
You
always learned the
came.
hard way. Yes.
Well, been
I
there.
always learned the hard way. Yes, I don't learn. I love to. I love the performance of learning, even though I don't learn. But if I enjoy the process, what's the problem? So I decided to go with him. I entered to his bedroom with my backpack. I turned around to put my backpack on the floor and started to get undressed. And he is on the bed with his knees in here, like
Uh-huh.
showing his foot, like, now do it. And like opening his bottle of poppers.
Poppers,
And I was like,
yeah.
okay, you're more than ready, baby. I was trying to, I don't know, it wasn't even my health inside him. And she came, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh. And I was like, what waste of time.
Yeah, we have this song that's from the 50s or 60s, I think, here in the United States. It's like, so if you want to be happy for the rest of your life, never make a pretty woman your wife. And I feel like it's kind of the same idea here, which is like
Yeah.
hot guys are very pretty to look at, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they can be really fun, obviously, but
Yes.
they're not always in it. They don't have to bring as much to the table in terms of skills and
Yes.
talent
Yes.
sometimes. They rely on that body. Stop relying on that body is what, the
Exactly.
RuPaul expression. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I
sometimes,
feel that.
yeah. And I think it's very important to think that I always try to to bring to myself what I think about other people. Even if I'm telling you this story about this guy who was very, very rude, relying on some qualities of his body, I always try to think, if I sometime behave similarly, do I have some behavior sometimes that may look like the same? And I think that it's very important to think that maybe not about physical features, but I do rely on some qualities that I have. Uh, and I know that sometimes I have been uh, abusive in that terms, of course. Yeah, I think I have to, if you want to change something, you have to acknowledge it first. So
You
I
got
was
to
like,
start with yourself.
yes, exactly. And I've always tried to make this intellectual effort. But okay, there are some moments, there have been some experiences when I have tried to take advantage of something, or being unfair with some other people because I have these features and the other don't. Yeah, I think it's something
We're all
important to,
human,
to think about.
right? We're all
Exactly.
human and we're on those apps and we're horny. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we treat people with the same kind of disrespect that we get.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Exactly.
really, you don't even realize sometimes you're doing it. There can be these power games where
Mm-hmm.
people play in terms of, leaving you on red. Like they'll read your
Mm-hmm.
message, but they won't reply. And you'll be like,
Uh,
and then I'll find myself sometimes doing exactly the same thing
mm-hmm.
for many different reasons. Sometimes you're not being rude. Sometimes you just don't know, if now is the right time. But
Mm-hmm.
But, you have to reflect back on yourself and think, am I also doing and contributing to this
Mm-hmm.
pattern?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I change it? And one of the previous guests, Shane Lucas, that I interviewed, talked about looking for people that are curious, that want to know things about you and that you want to know things about. And I really try to keep that. It's hard sometimes because people don't like to talk a lot on those apps,
Mm-hmm.
but if you kind of select for people who seem genuinely curious about you and what
Mm-hmm.
turns you on, and that
Mm-hmm.
you're also curious about them and what turns them on, I think that can be helpful to weed
Yeah,
out those guys like you're talking about who
exactly.
are not curious at all and not good as you said.
Yes, exactly. And it's a lack of reflection. It's a lack of curiosity. It's like taking for granted that this thing will directly bring you to another one, and that this is all figured out because there is this other thing in the equation, and it's just unreal. But
Yeah.
some people take it for granted. I can't blame no one with the culture again, but well, it happens.
Yeah, I had an experience years ago, sort of similar to what you described, where this guy messaged me and I couldn't meet up right then. And I said no. And his response is like, I wasn't really into you, actually. I just thought you would be easy. And I was like, okay, great. Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay,
What the?
that's a
Like,
very rude thing to say.
it's awful.
It's
And I think,
awful. I
yeah,
remember
and that can bring,
an ex-boyfriend told me the very same thing.
uh,
You
I'm
have
sorry.
people behind you, you have all these kind of people who invite you to dinner or something, but not because you're handsome, because you're easy. And I was like, okay,
Just the audacity to say that. And
exactly.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
lot. It's a
yes,
lot. So you had to kiss some frogs to get to the good stuff. What is
yes.
today? What do you think the best sex looks like for you today?
But the best sex looks like two or more adults putting their consent and their craziness in a playground. To me, good sex is a playground. To me, good sex is about taking poses, like let's pause it for a moment, that's it, and restore it again. Good sex is about let me catch some air. Good sex is about good. Should I go upper? Should I go lower? Good sex is about having a good laugh in between. Good
Mm,
sex is about having the chance to not being worried about how you are being seen.
it's
For me, good
real.
sex is about it's like this. I used to think of good sex like my own version of my own porn movie, considering there's like a fiction, of course, not like the main videos that we see. I used to think of my sexuality as like my best sex, my version of best sex would be a porn clip directed for me, by me.
That's a nice way to think about
But
it.
I have started to make it a little more complex because it's not about how it looks. It's about how it
That's right.
feels, and it's about how the environment. So it's the clip and there behind the scenes and the process of being writing it during the time you're filming it. It's everything happening at the same time. And I think it's possible when you have the chance to be yourself and to ask for the things you want in the moment, and you are open enough to let the other person be, and that's great. I remember I had one of the best experiences some months ago with someone that he was attending one of my courses years ago, and then we found each other again on Instagram, and he was like, "You were the teacher in the," I was like, "Yes." It was like, "I wish I could have the chance to for taking you to dinner after this and everything." And I was like, "Well, you have the chance now." So we met.
Yeah.
We talked a little on Instagram. We talked about fantasies. We talked about things that we wanted to do, things that we'd like to. We defined like the basics. Sorry, and we had one of the best sexual encounters of my entire life. I was like, oh my god. I mean, she was an athlete, but not just in physical terms, because you see when a muscle is trained, but in the conversation, you can realize too, you can tell when communication skills are trained too. You can see when honesty is trained too. You can see when you can tell a lot of things when you talk to someone. So it was very, very apparent. Uh, we were like having fun. It was about have fun, and it was great. I mean, yeah.
That's awesome. I'm going to record this question so I can edit it back into that.
Okay.
so I
Okay.
can energize.
Okay.
But you're sorry, the hands will be problematic with. Yep.
Sorry.
You're good.
Thank you. Let me do
So can
these
you
things before. Is that my hair is in this phase when it's growing, but it's not short, but it's not long exactly, and it falls off. Yeah, it's better. Thank
so can you tell me about one of the best experiences that you've had?
you.
Okay, I'm just gonna edit that in too so that you can then tell that story that you just told. And for the clips, it's good to have a back and forth. So like I said, when you just stick to one story, like don't.
Yeah.
I remember a time when I just
Yeah.
stick to the one.
Okay.
It will be easier, I promise,
Yeah.
in the long run.
Yes. Thank
Sorry to
you.
interrupt again.
I just got carried away.
I know. I love that. And it's usually amazing just for the Instagram stuff. It has to be so
I know.
tight.
Yeah.
Let me figure. I know where I was going to go from there. So are you a lights on or lights off kind of guy?
My lights, that's a good question. My lights on, it's not about physical features, but there has to be something physical that attracts me, of course. Even if it's beard, chest, legs, whatever. There has to be something physical. Yeah. Uh, there doesn't have to be the whole package of physical features that I will like or I find attractive. I need a good laugh. Of course, I need a good laugh. I need a good sense of humor. I need a curious person. I need someone who encourages you to talk. I need someone, what turns me on is someone that when you say something that can be kind of a censorship reason, that person asks you, and what else? With very interest. I love interest in passionate people. I love people who turns me on is people that you say something about some situation, some fantasy, something that you want to do, and they took it and if you had this, have you ever tried to imagine if you had this, or if you put this other more element? I was like, okay, so someone who interacts with your desire, that always turns me out. It also turns me out, of course, when someone has this ability to pause things. Okay, let's bring some water. Let's bring some. Are you okay? Are you feeling good? It doesn't
Ability
break
to
my
take a
fantasy.
break. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't finish my fantasy, of course. It makes me feel like, okay, we're taking care of each other too. That's something that turns me on. What turns me off, it's way easier. The people who just lay down
Well,
and what you.
let me ask you that. Sorry. Just I sorry to keep interrupting. Now that I've edited so many of
Don't
these, I
worry.
just know what's going to work best. And if I ask you that question, it will be I can use it more. So we got a good idea of kind of what turns you on, what turns you off.
Oh, it turns me off. It's a little easier. The people who just lay down and make you do all the effort. Uh,
Yeah.
the people who just throw some crumbles of information and you have to figure out all that will happen. It's not that I need 3 or 4 hours encounter. I'm a big fan of quickies.
Really?
Well, we have to settle. We have to decide it together. I kind of entitled people. I hate when people are just like, okay, but you see this beauty here in front of you.
Yeah.
So you want to worship me,
There.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, I have not decided that. And you will not decide for me. Unless it's my fantasy, in which case, I am still deciding, Uh, that's kind of what turns me on. People with bad moods in terms of in people who are rude, like people who are entitled. That's what that it's very easy to turn me off, and it's very easy that if some people has already turned me on, it's very easy to turn me off. I have learned to not continue with interactions that I don't want to, and I have learned that I can stop being afraid of finishing an encounter is something that's, if I don't like something, and I'm very, very, very in peace with that.
Yeah, amen to that. How did you learn to say no effectively? Because I think that's what's so hard for some people is not just I don't want to have sex with you, but maybe I'm going to leave this situation because I don't feel it.
Yeah. Well, first I have to remind myself that this is not the last encounter, or this is not the last chance that I will have to have an encounter. Uh, I remember I have to remind myself that there is a lot of people that are into me, that finds me attractive, that want to have a good moment with me sexually, and that makes me think with more confidence. Like, all right, this time it's not happening.
Peace out.
Next time with other person, it will happen because there will be some other people. There are some other people that will be more compatible with the things that I want and the things that I want to carry to bring to the table, and I will be more compatible with some other people. So if it didn't work, well, thank you for your time. My best wishes, and that's it.
For now.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I'm not.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yes.
And what do you think you described kind of the characteristics of what you think the best sex looks like for you? Can you, looking back, is there an encounter where you're like, you know what, this is pretty much close to the best?
Close to the best. Close to the best. This guy that was my student in the course that I did like some years ago.
Mm.
There's been some. I think that since 2015, maybe 10 years ago, I started to develop this workshop that is called Sesiones Explícitas. That is a sexual health workshop for gay men. We work it naked. So from that course, I have developed some small workshops, with short versions with very specific objectives. So there was some guy who took the course with me years ago, and like some months ago, found me on Instagram and was like, I really wanted to have some interaction with you after that course. But I found it problematic. I knew that it wasn't going to be the most ethical thing. And well, now that I have found you and some years have been, uh, I want to talk about it. And I was like, I think this is a great time to talk about it. And we talked a little about fantasies. We talked a little about situations. We made our schedules to work on together. And we had a very, very good time. We had this basis very, very clear about what we wanted to do. And it wasn't like we had any script of what to do and what to say, but we had a general idea. And from that, we started to just to have fun and just to let each one carry the way. It was very, very, it was a very, it was about reaffirmation, of course. Like there was always this communication verbally about this is what I wanted to do like years ago, and I finally having the chance of with all this desire and the tone of the voice, and there's also a lot of things involving the whole body, not focusing in some parts of the body. It was like a whole experience, and it was like let's make a pause. I need some water so we can keep on continuing like this. It's very interesting how you can be like kind of the word when you're like craving for someone, but at the same time that you feel like you have craving for someone, you also know that you still have time to make little pauses, so you can still enjoy the situation. So it was very, very hard and intense sometimes, and it was very, very calm sometimes. And I think it was about balance. It was about talking about what we wanted in the moment, and to continue asking to the other one if we wanted to up the level or making it low. Uh, it was great. it was like close to the best. I wouldn't know which one to call my best, but that was definitely one of the most recent and the most pleasurables ever.
Great. You mentioned these workshops. Tell me a little bit about what you would do in these workshops, because I'm sure people are curious.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I will gladly do. Well, so Students Explicit Test, Explicit Sessions, it's a workshop that I developed with some inspirations in some Tantra workshops that I went into sometimes. Tantra is more spiritual, and I make my workshops a little more practical because I don't have a spiritual training in anything, but I do have this experience and this knowledge in practical things about sexual health. I don't know. It's very practical. I forgot the other words. Sorry. But it's something like it's about your own body, how you think of your own body, not in the spiritual terms, in just physical terms. Very very practical. And I came up with the idea of first, we need to learn about sexuality in more relaxed environments, and we have to give ourselves the chance to learn in terms of pleasure, not in terms of guilt or in terms of what could go wrong. And if we think of terms of what could go wrong, we have to think about what can we bring to the table that has been wrong during our lives. So there's like two big, I always say that this workshop has two strong legs. The first one is this about experience, of course, and you have the chance to talk about consent in every exercise. We always talk about consent in every exercise because I always have an assistant with me. Like a magician, there's always one person with me, which I show the exercise first with that person. Okay, the next exercise is about this and this and this. And I do all the exercise with the person that I have with demonstration. And then I ask to the team, to the people, is there any one of you that doesn't want to do this exercise? And if someone raises their hands, it doesn't matter, it's great. You help me to work on with the materials, with the massage oil and all these things. I mean, you can learn maybe by not participating. But if you participate, I want you to feel safe and I want you to feel comfortable when you participate. So that's the first thing. We talk about sexual health in a very with a very specific perspective of consent. Because the other leg of the workshop is that even if the people that signs up to the workshop, maybe some of them are non-binary people that have sex with gay men. The thing is, there's a lot of violence in our interactions. We still have the wrong idea, that harder is better, that deeper is better, that stronger is better, and not all the times, not with all the people. And there's some awful experience that people have in terms of I couldn't stop this, and some people get hurt physically, and some people get hurt emotionally. So that's all the thing that we work on in the workshop. It's a 6-hour workshop because it's always step by step, little by little. We go from very basic things to some other exercise, every time with less clothes, every time with a little more ideas to complex. And always after an exercise, we always try to discuss the center issue. But the exercise is as provocation to speak. It's like let's use the exercise as an excuse to talk about some other ideas. It's not just about getting naked with other guys, which I always say to people, this is not exactly an orgy. If you want to, I can manage your own. I'm very, very good at managing orgy. I'm a very good orgy organizer and orgy planner, I will say. But well, what I always tell them is that it's not it's more like a series of exercises and discussions that are from very basic things to more complex things about what is defined in us, in our sexuality, being rude and violent with other men, being entitled to do things that the other people maybe don't want to do. Because the most of the time when gay men talk about of their sexual encounters, they will use metaphors with violence. The most of them, I wouldn't know how to translate it in English, but it was like, I really destroyed her whole, It was like, destroying is really a good thing in all this context. Is it really what the other person wanted? Because if it is, it's great. But maybe if it wasn't what the other people was asking for. So that's kind of, it's the first time I tried to talk about my workshop in English. It's been quite a challenge. Thank you for that.
I think you are onto something with this tendency to, I guess it's just toxic masculinity that seeps into our our heads, and we end up using this kind of macho language around
Mm-hmm.
him in half. I just destroyed
Oh,
his whole. Part of that, I guess, is toxic masculinity. What are the good parts of masculinity that we should kind of promote and kind of foster and feel good about, and how do we separate that from the toxic stuff?
that's quite precious. You always ask the smallest questions because because I'm going to be totally honest with you, as I have been my whole life. The first idea that appears in my head is nothing, but
Right? Yeah, I
yeah,
feel that. I
but
do.
I think about it for a second, and I said, okay, one of the first features that I think is there's this like sufficiency. I think that's the word when you are able to speak your mind. You're able to say what you want to do, what you want to have, what you want to say, basically.
Confidence.
Yeah, that confidence that is like, all right, that this is what I need. And even if other people tries to convince me that maybe you don't want this, yes, I want this. But I think there also this crafty feature. Like we don't want to hire other people to fix something in our house. We have
We're
this
supposed to be
confidence.
handyman.
Yes, exactly. I can do it myself, and I can prove myself that I'm good at it. Even if it was my first attempt to do it, I will prove myself that I'm good enough to do this. It will bring me a satisfaction feeling. And the other thing is like, socially we are encouraged to take some risks, and
Mm.
and sometimes we don't see things as risks, but as opportunities.
Mm.
And I think that's a very good thing in terms of, I remember a friend of mine in high school that said, uh, if you don't want it, we cannot do it again. If you didn't like it at the end, we cannot do it again. So I think these are three features at last that as an adult I think of masculinity. And of course I'm not rejecting the idea of that list becoming a bigger list during the following years. Yes, if you ask me the same question in 1 year or 2 years, maybe I will come with a bigger list.
Definitely. I appreciate that because I think sometimes masculinity, the label of toxic masculinity, often we can see that and we can appreciate what's bad about masculinity. But I think there are also good elements of it that we also want to try to hold on to and not throw out with the bathwater.
Mm-hmm.
And as gay men, we obviously have a fraught and troubled relationship with masculinity just because of the nature of our society. But reclaiming that good stuff, I think, can be helpful for people. I always like to end with my favorite segment, Sordid Lives or Untold Tales, or SLUT for short. What's the sluttiest thing you ever did?
The slightest thing I ever did. I was lucky enough to have a sex club like 3 blocks away from my house. As
Nice.
I was starting prep, and prep gave me a lot of permission to do a lot of things. So I remember it's one of my golden memories of my sexual life. It's one of the highlights. My first test to mouth. I was like,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Uh, I haven't experienced myself much as a bottom until the recent years and after prep. And I have gave myself a tons of options and things to do that I wasn't able to do. I'm not just thinking that prep is doing all the homework, because in parallel I have made a lot of thinking and a lot of reflection inside myself, and I'm always these people who wonders why and how. So I think that has helped a lot. But yes, there's a lot of things that are like my sluttiest things. The first gangbang is bottom. That was quite a memorable afternoon. My first orgy. I have tons. I have tons.
Yeah.
And there's some other things that they were like very, very slutty, and they sound very good in history, but in real terms they were very, very uncomfortable. Sometimes I fulfilled my fantasy of having sex in the beach, but it's very, very uncomfortable. I was like, it sounds very sexy, like doing it, and it's like, no, there's sand all over me, there's sand inside of me. No, I need to stop it.
Some places you do not want exfoliated with sand.
Yes,
It is
exactly.
just not the
Yeah.
place.
But it's good to have this experience, because now I know that I don't want to do it again. And no one is coming here to tell me how does it feel. I
Amen to
have
that.
had the experience for myself, and that's my decision to make.
Amen. Well, that's a
Yeah.
really good place to end. I appreciate it. Tell me if listeners or watchers, viewers want to learn more about you, where can they find you online?
Well, they can find me online in Instagram. My Instagram name is Nolberto. I think we can write it down.
Yes,
So
I will tag
it's
you, of course.
my
Yeah.
name in Instagram and on X, formerly known as Twitter. There's lots of nudity and explicit material in X, so it's NSFW, I think the last
And not safe for work. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Instagram is a little more about education stuff and the things that I do daily, and lots of underwear. That's where you can find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nolberto. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you a lot. Thank you for your trust in me. Thank you for considering me as one of your guests. You're a person that I admire a lot.
Well, the feeling is mutual, for sure.
And I'm very flattered to be here.
That's our show for today. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, leave us a review on Apple, on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your content. We would be most grateful for that kind of feedback. It keeps us going. And remember, if you aren't having your best sex life, I can help. My services as a sex coach are designed to help you identify and overcome those obstacles that are standing between you and your best sex life. Find out more on my website, thebestgaysex.net. Till next time.